Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet, and this week's video is brought to you by Credit Repair. And today I'm going to be answering some questions that you guys sent us on Twitter and Instagram. And while I did get some more typical money questions, I also got a lot of, frankly, really spicy questions about the money world, about politics, about stuff that's maybe a little bit more personal than it is purely financial, but I think is very interesting and obviously informs a lot of what I do here on this channel. So I thought I would do a video entirely of these more spicy questions. And while I couldn't answer them all, obviously, I will hopefully be doing another Q&A very soon where I will be getting into even more of your questions, this time obviously with a little bit more of a purely financial bent. So let's get right into it. So the first question I'll be answering is, do you hate minimalism as much as Erin, Broke Millennial? I should first say that I do not believe that Erin hates minimalism. I just think she has a kind of complicated view on it, as do I. So as some of you guys may remember, Erin did a rant on this very channel on her former show, The 3-Minute Guide, about her thoughts on minimalism. And although you may have seen that first, I have also written kind of extensively on the topic of minimalism from a fairly critical point of view. And actually, I did an interview recently with the awesome YouTuber WheezyWaiter for an episode that he's doing about minimalism, and he also is interviewing minimalists to kind of get all sides of the perspective. And I do go into detail in that interview talking about my thoughts on the matter, but I do want to be kind of nuanced in my answer here, because although I can sometimes have a negative reaction to what I would describe as the aesthetics of minimalism or the aesthetic movement of minimalism, I don't think that it is inherently in and of itself a bad or negative thing. I think the problem for me is when we conflate minimalism, which is often a set of consumer choices, with a kind of political or sociological movement. As we've talked about on this channel fairly recently, the limits of consumer choices in terms of the impact that they can have on overall environmental issues are pretty limited. As we've discussed before, only about 100 companies represent 70% of carbon emissions, which means that in order to affect these real differences, we have to make changes on the governmental, the regulatory, and the corporate level. Without changing some of these fundamental incentive structures on how goods and services are produced, it's going to be very difficult to make these changes through individual consumer choices. Yes, boycotting something like plastic straws, right there with you, is a good choice on a personal level, and it's always good to make those better carbon choices when you can, but it's also going to take much more systemic and primarily regulatory changes to get to a place where we're not all constantly surrounded by such bad consumer options. So all of that is to say that often minimalism will present an alternative to a lifestyle which is understandably not great. We often will wake up and feel like, wow, I'm surrounded by so much useless crap that I don't even love. I want to break free of that system. And that's fair. And if you want to make the choice to really reduce your life down as much as possible, you should feel empowered to do it. But when you conflate that with a meaningful way to get to a better consumer structure, it's not only going to be possibly the most difficult, if not impossible, way to affect that change on a mass scale, it's also something that not many people have the financial privilege to participate in. For example, if you are very low income, it's not going to be accessible to you to buy super high quality, sustainable clothing items, or one product that's good enough to last you for many years of daily use, rather than many products which are going to wear out more quickly but are cheaper to buy at cost. When many people are making consumer choices at the store, for example, it's not possible for them to pay extra for the multi-use item. And when we shame people for doing things like buying poorly packaged products or fast fashion, what we're often really inadvertently doing is class shaming people. I ultimately believe that minimalism, above all else, is a lifestyle choice. And for many people, it can have huge spiritual benefits as well. It can make them feel lighter, happier, and more in control of their surroundings. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do often feel like the conversation gets kind of shamey and more based on how good you are as an individual, but also B, doesn't really answer the greater problem of how do we get to a set of consumer choices where everyone has better options? How do we get to a place where we're not constantly being marketed incredibly cheap and exploitatively produced products that are bad for the environment? Wanting to reduce your carbon footprint is great. And hey, I live in a small apartment and don't even own a car. I'm doing pretty good on the carbon footprint front compared to most Americans. But I know also that my individual consumer choices are not going to be enough to make the kind of change where that someone living in rural Kansas has access to the same choices and lifestyle that I do. And it's also not going to be enough to meaningfully halt or even reverse the current climate catastrophes that are going on around us. So I do not hate minimalism by any means, nor do I think it's an inherently bad thing. I just think it provides a very incomplete yet kind of satisfying answer to a much more complicated question. But as I said, I do get into a little more detail about this in my interview with WheezyWaiter, which will hopefully be up very soon and we'll link you to when it's available. The second question is, what do you do when someone you know gets involved in an MLM? Is it enough to just never buy the product and politely decline to go to the parties? Or should you take it upon yourself to share that John Oliver bit about MLMs? So first of all, I should say that John Oliver bit is an excellent one on breaking down the fundamentals of what MLMs are. And that stands for multi-level marketing programs, which are basically pyramid schemes. Essentially, you pay to be part of this marketing program where you're incentivized, obviously, to sell the product to other people, but you have to buy a lot of the product, and that's primarily how the company makes the money. You guys probably see them all the time on your Facebook, people selling clothes, jewelry, beauty products, workout supplements, all that stuff. MLMs to me, honestly, I think it's kind of an oversimplification to compare it to drug dealing, but I do think there are some similarities there in the sense that MLMs prey on communities that are often fairly vulnerable and in an underemployed situation, primarily targeting stay-at-home mothers and military spouses who otherwise have a difficult time finding gainful employment. Actually, there was recently a fantastic piece by the author Julie Bogan, who is herself a military spouse, about the underemployment and unemployment crisis amongst military spouses, which I will link you guys to in the description. When I think of the drug dealing element of it, I think of it as they are hooking these people in to what are almost universally losing propositions. The statistic is about 99% of people who enter an MLM will lose money. So they are being knowingly targeted and brought into this opportunity where they are told essentially that they can make a new life for themselves, potentially become wealthy, help their families, etc. And in the best of cases, they'll just get nothing or lose a little money, and often in the worst, they will go severely into debt and potentially further harm their families. And I really do think that in terms of preying on communities and exploiting communities that are vulnerable, there is that parallel to me with drug dealing. And when you think about in drug dealing, the majority of profits going to a very small cabal of people at the top, there's also a similarity there with MLMs. And so from a moral perspective, are people potentially killing themselves with these, bath products the way they might be with hard drugs? Of course not. But from an economic perspective and how it exploits vulnerable communities, I think there are a lot of meaningful parallels. And if we looked at the people pushing these MLMs as predators in a similar way, I think we would really understand the situation better and have a much more appropriate reaction. Because the truth is, people getting other people involved in MLMs know what they are doing. It is a very clear exploitative framework that relies on exploitation and relies on people going into debt or losing money in order to function. There is an inherently predatory element. So I personally think that it goes beyond not just going to their parties or not buying their products. I believe that if there is someone in your life, like a relative, a close friend, etc., who is getting involved in an MLM, I believe it is your moral obligation to do what you can to get them to stop or to get out of it. Obviously, you're not going to completely destroy or endanger your relationship with that person, but I believe it is up to you to have a frank conversation with them, to explain the reality of these programs, to explain their exploitative nature, and explain that 99% of people will lose money doing this. You may not be able to get everyone out of it, but you may be able to get some to at least reconsider. And more importantly, you're not going to be either actively or passively feeding into this dynamic. Part of what allows MLMs to thrive is this feeling that other people are not going to stop their friend or loved one from trying to make money and make a better life for themselves. If they're just trying to sell some products and have a good time and throw little wine parties where people can buy necklaces, like what's wrong with that, right? The innocent appearance of it is what allows it to continue. So I do think doing whatever you can to break that innocent appearance and make it more clear what these programs really are, the better. I use the drug dealing analogy because I do believe that there are important parallels. You obviously don't want to say that to someone who's engaged in one of these programs. Like, you don't want to accuse them of essentially dealing drugs, but the more you can look at these companies through that lens of like, wow, you are really preying on vulnerable communities and exploiting them for money, I think the better and the more clarity you'll have on the situation. Long story short, fuck MLMs and save your loved ones from them if at all possible. So my next question is, now that you have been more vocal about your political views, did it affect sponsorships or general ability to generate money for the business? It's one of my personal biggest fears because everyone is so polarized nowadays. So my answer to this is that I've never hidden my political views. I definitely have in the past few years become more vocal to this point because I think that it's increasingly necessary, but also because given what we talk about on this channel, I've become more and more aware of how much things need to change at a systemic level, or we're just really heading, headfirst into another crisis. When it comes to things like the student debt crisis, obviously we help you work strategies out to pay down your debt and live a better life. But on a macroeconomic level, the level of debt that the individual average millennial is carrying is unsustainable and has real negative effects on our overall economy. We can't buy homes as much. We can't participate as much in the consumer economy. We have essentially no plans for retirement. These are all problems that are just kind of accumulating in the background. And when you compound that with things like medical debt or the fact that people are consistently underemployed for their, education level, like these problems exist at a level that are beyond the individual's ability to solve. And some people may get out of these situations, but I believe that we need to change them at a more fundamental level. So for example, when I hear something like Warren's proposal to cancel student debt, like on an economic level, that is a wonderful thing for this country. And it would also provide unbelievable relief to so many Americans. And I'm someone who went to community college. I didn't even get to go to a four-year school primarily to avoid debt. And so it would be easy for me to say, well, I made the hard choice. I went to community college. I live with my parents. I did this, that, and the other. Like, you guys should pay your debt. But I don't feel that way. I think that everyone should feel that freedom of not having to walk around every day with massive debt. So my political views is more than anything are informed by my understanding of the financial situation in America as it affects everyone, not just as it affects a few people who are able to make certain choices. Has it affected certain sponsorships or partnerships? Absolutely. There are parts of this industry, the financial industry, and especially the financial media industry, that have totally the opposite view. There are many people who radically disagree with me in the financial industry and in the financial media industry. There are many people who don't believe that all Americans should have, health care, who don't believe that public college should be free or that we should have, many of the basic social safety nets that other developed countries do. And that has cost me, that's cost me certain partners, that's cost me, various industry events, let's say, but I'm fine with that. We obviously have no problem working with clients. We are always very transparent about the work that we do with them and what we offer and who our audience is and who we are. And I personally believe that ultimately you are only your values, right? Like, obviously you have to have enough money to live and to pay the rent and whatnot. And we're a business, we have salaries to pay, we have, benefits and an office and all the stuff that comes with running a business, right? So that's a concern. But at the end of the day, if you don't have your values, if you don't have morals, if I was forced to lie in order to in order to have a business, I don't think it would be worth it to have a business, especially one that the entire purpose of TFD is to communicate with you guys honestly about personal finance. And a huge part of personal finance is the overarching structure in which you are making financial decisions. Thus far, it has not prevented me from being able to have a business, which is wonderful. And we've grown year over year. So I don't personally have any fears that, you know, being open about my progressive political views is going to stop that anytime soon. But if someone, you know, came up to me tomorrow and said, like, you either have to pretend to believe this totally different set of, you know, beliefs, or you don't have a business anymore, I would choose not to have a business, you know? And we operate according to these values. You know, we don't have unpaid interns. You know, people are paid a fair wage. Like, I earn less than employees in our company. So it's definitely not something where we're setting up an exploitive system. Like, we operate in a way that's consistent with our values too. But yeah, so to answer that question, yes, it has come. They'll never tell you to your face. They're never like, you said this, you know, about politics, so we're not working with you, but you know. But that's okay. There are people that I would not work with because of their political views or their social views. Because one last thing that I would just like to say is that I think that it's really misleading when people talk about things like, these are your political views. Me believing that every American should have health care, me believing that no American should go into the hospital for a broken leg or for cancer and come out, you know, having to file for bankruptcy or, you know, having to, you know, leave their home because of it. To categorize that as politics is incredibly misleading and makes it sound superficial. This isn't about politics. This is about how people live. This is life or death issues. And if you have never been in a position where your economic situation has it has impacted your ability to live life, then you are very lucky. But that's not the case for many, many Americans. About half of Americans could not cover an unexpected $400 emergency. These are life or death questions. Massive amounts of seniors having to work, you know, entry-level jobs in order to make enough money to live because their benefits don't cover their living costs. That's a crisis. These are human issues. These are not political issues. And now for a more fun one. Do I watch any YouTubers that are outside of the personal finance genre? Yes, very, very much. So I actually watch a lot of YouTube. Obviously, I do watch a fair amount of like political and social commentary. You know, I would say that my like favorite YouTuber that I really, really look out for and watch whenever her stuff comes out is ContraPoints. If you've not heard of her, definitely go check her out and subscribe. She does a lot of social commentary, political commentary, but in such a fun, theatrical way. Like every time a new episode comes out, like me and Mark order takeout and we wait to watch it and we like, it's fun. It's like a cinematic experience at our house. And similarly, I think they're friends, Lindsay Ellis, who does film commentary and criticism. I love her. She's wonderful. Similarly, the notes from the screenplay is fantastic in you know in the sort of like cinema commentary experience. I actually love, I think it's Wired, I'll check, but I think it's Wired who does the series where they have like, they'll have like a linguist come on and look at all of the different accents and, you know, impressions and stuff in movies. They'll have like, you know, a forensic person come on and check and like review all the forensic scenes, doctors, lawyers, all that stuff. They kind of just like break down how realistic these things are being portrayed in movies and film, and I love that series. I definitely watch ASMR, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a big ASMR fan. Definitely just checking out the ASMR tag. You know, in terms of political coverage, I do love to watch, you know, I watch Kyle Kulinski, David Pakman, The Majority Report, Rational National. You know, listen, progressive YouTube, there's not a ton of them, but you know, the ones that are out there, I do love. And I do, to be fair, I will watch a fair amount of right-wing YouTube because I think that it's a pretty powerful movement that is important to understand and keep an eye on and learn from, because I want to make sure that the arguments that, you know, we are making for these progressive ideals are as compelling and informed as possible, and understanding the audience as much as possible. Yeah, and you know, lastly, I will watch, oh, and you know, I do really enjoy Hank and John's videos. I'll still watch those quite a bit. And I do watch a lot of educational YouTube. I just watch a ton of YouTube. I am probably the 30-year-old who watches the most YouTube by volume, you know, in the continental US. So the last question is another question that's all about, the PF space, personal finance, if you guys are fans. What is your take on the FIRE movement? Is FIRE even possible for someone living in a high cost of living city like New York City? So for those of you who are not familiar, FIRE stands for Financial Independence / Retiring Early. It's a pretty popular movement within the overall personal finance space. I'm obviously pretty familiar with it working in this space, and I definitely don't practice it. But my feelings on FIRE, and essentially the theory behind FIRE is really reducing your living costs. And this is an oversimplification, but essentially it's, reducing your living costs enough on a day-to-day basis that you can save enough money. Obviously, there's probably some intelligent investing going on there as well, but that you can save enough money by a younger age than typical retirement in order to achieve financial independence, which essentially means like you no longer have to work. I know that a lot of people in FIRE, like they achieve financial independence, but they keep working or they have streams of passive income, but it's essentially the principle that you do not have to wait until you're retired to no longer have to work. And obviously, most of the time that will require living on a very, very reduced portion of your income in order to save that amount. So my feelings on the movement are very, very similar to my feelings on minimalism. Ultimately, it's a lifestyle choice. I again understand the feeling where the desire for something like a FIRE movement comes from. It's very easy to understand on a human level what's appealing about that. But I do think that similarly to minimalism, it provides a very incomplete answer to a much more complicated question. We're living in a country where a dignified, livable retirement is increasingly rare, is not guaranteed, even for people who work their whole lives. And that is a problem that needs to be solved at the systemic level. And I worry sometimes that a focus on maximizing individual choices in order to kind of game your own retirement kind of passes by the bigger question, which is what are we going to do as a society with, with the increasing reality of no real retirement for oncoming generations of older people who are living longer and longer. This is a real question that we all have to reckon with as a society. So I understand the FIRE movement from a perspective of like, hey, retirement in America is scary. And also it's not great to envision having to work a job that you may not love until you're, much older. But I don't know that it could ever become something besides a fairly niche lifestyle choice. And on a personal level, and for most people, the idea of reducing and minimizing your spending for the first couple decades of your life, or adult decades, is pretty unappealing. It certainly is to me. I am not really interested in radically reducing my living costs, or not traveling, or not going to movies, or not going to restaurants, or not buying great foods at the grocery store. Like, I am interested in living every day in a way that I find very enjoyable. Now, obviously, that does not mean spending ridiculously, but if I'm at a place where I'm saving a nice healthy part of my income every month, but not enough to become financially independent by 40, I still think that that's great, and that's kind of spacing out my my luxuries, my indulgences, and my joys throughout my life. So I don't personally identify with that, and I think that a lot of people don't. I think that that idea is fairly unappealing, and also, let's be honest, fairly inaccessible. A common criticism of the FIRE movement is that it's often made up by people with fairly high earning jobs who have low costs of living, which is not the case of the majority of Americans. So I'm in a position where I could choose to be FIRE, given my, debt to income, all of that stuff, but I don't want to be. But for the majority of Americans who would be looking for financial advice and solutions to their problems, it's really not a huge option. It's not something that could be a meaningful choice for them. As far as doing it in New York, I can't even imagine the life that you would live in New York City. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, not in like a super happening neighborhood. I pay $3,000 a month. Well, my husband and I pay $3,000 a month. And with that, I still have, my 30-minute commute every day on the subway. The, subway is $120 a month. Just like going to the grocery store, all the groceries are like twice as expensive here as they are in other cities. Like, for me to be FIRE here I honestly don't know how I would do it. I'm sure it's possible, but the kind of life that I would be living in New York, like basically off the bat, it would either require that I live in like an extremely small apartment, like a studio that I share with my husband, which like would not be my husband for very long if that was our living situation. Oh my God. Or living so far out that I have like a 2-hour commute to and from work every day, which I would not do, which is not worth it in terms of quality of life. And again, there are many New Yorkers who have to do that anyway, and they're not saving barely anything. So all that to say, like similarly to minimalism, like have at it. If that's what brings you joy, if that's what makes your life more fulfilling and gives you a sense of purpose and makes sense for you and makes sense of the world, awesome. But I don't think it's a scalable solution for many people at all. I don't think it's a solution to the overarching problems which are leading people to these questions in the first place. And third, and perhaps more importantly, if what it does is it takes people who have these questions and points them towards like individual lifestyle choices, and really does not at all focus on the greater questions that got them to this place, I feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity. But that's just me. Ultimately, the last thing I would like everyone to take away from this Q&A is that I have my opinions, I have a pretty specific life, but one thing that I do know is that I used to be poor, and I know what it's like to live in a house where, you know, you're worried about getting sick. You know, you're worried about being able to afford basics. You're worried about, you know, the car breaking down. You're worried about all of these things. And now I don't live that life anymore. I live a life where I'm not worried if I have to go to the doctor. I'm not worried if my dog has to go to the doctor. You know, I'm not rich, but I'm certainly in a place where the day-to-day problems of life do not affect me in the same way. And I know how much of a difference that makes on every level of your life, especially in terms of mental health and especially in terms of just being able to breathe. And I believe that we could have a country where everyone has those luxuries, the luxury to just know that even in the worst case scenario, you're not going to be on the street, you're not going to not be able to get medical treatment, you're not going to be able to not eat. These things could be available to everyone. And I would like to get to a place where everyone has that peace of mind that I now have. And I don't think we're going to get there just by all individually making better choices. We should also individually make better choices to live better lives, but we should also do things outside of our immediate life and our immediate choices to make everyone's life better. Anyway, that's just my opinion. So, you know, you guys sound off in the comments. I'll be reading them with kind of like through my fingers because I'm sure some people are going to be mad at me, but whatever. And one other thing that I can say is that if you are someone who has dealt with credit issues like I have, I used to have an extremely bad credit score and now I have a very good one, and you feel like you want help or advice or guidance in order to get your credit score back up, we have a perfect place for you to look, and that is Credit Repair. CreditRepair.com can help you work to repair, build, and maintain your credit score by working directly with the credit bureaus to challenge any items on your credit report and teaching you how to understand both your own score and the rating system. To help show how it works, they gave 3 members of our audience a free trial to work on improving their scores over the next 6 months. Each of the participants currently have scores below 600, and each have gone through extremely difficult life circumstances that contributed to their financial struggles, from divorce to loss of a loved one to betrayal from a parent. Their stories serve as a reminder that there are so many unexpected reasons we might find ourselves needing help, and there is no shame in seeking out support. You can read about their experiences and learn how CreditRepair.com can help you work to build or rebuild good credit by checking out the links in our description. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for new and awesome videos. Bye!